Welcome to Her Extraordinary Life by Design, where we celebrate women who are shaping their lives one extraordinary day at a time. I'm your host, Leslie Gaudet, self-care coach for women who are ready to make self-care a priority to support them in life and business. Every week, I'll be speaking with inspiring women from various walks of life who will share their personal journeys and will discover how they have fearlessly carved their own paths as business owners, passionately pursuing their dreams and creating a meaningful impact on their communities. So let's get started. Hello, and welcome back to Extraordinary Life by Design podcast. I'm your host, Leslie Gaudet, and today I want to talk about success and grace, because I know that for many of you listening, success isn't something you stumbled into, right? You've built it deliberately, thoughtfully, through discipline, strategy, and rising to what was needed, and that matters. But here's what I've been thinking about. There's a version of success that comes with a cost most people don't talk about. It's not the long hours or the hard decisions, not even the trade-offs you've made along the way, but what you absorb internally to maintain it. The way your nervous system stays slightly activated even when there's no immediate demand. The way rest starts to feel like something you have to earn instead of something your body needs. The way joy becomes conditional on achievement instead of just present. And maybe you've told yourself that that's just what success at this level requires, that if you can endure it, you can sustain it. But here's the question I want you to sit with today. What if the real measure of success isn't what you've built, but what it costs you to hold it? And what if grace is what changes that equation entirely? Because I think that's where grace enters the conversation. Not grace as something soft or passive, but grace as what protects your internal ground while you're building the life you're building. You see, grace is what allows success to be sustainable instead of something you're enduring. It's what makes it possible for quality of life to exist alongside achievement, not something you earn afterwards. And what shapes how you define success, what you're willing to absorb to maintain it, and whether grace has been invited into the room at all. You see, when you're a high achiever, you don't sit on the sidelines waiting for life to happen to you. You know what it takes to create success. You understand the discipline required. You've proven you can rise to complexity and deliver. And for a long time, that capability feels like strength, and it is. Until one day you notice that success stops feeling like something you've built and starts feeling like something you're constantly working to maintain. Where rest doesn't feel restful anymore because your mind won't fully release. Where joy becomes conditional, something that shows up only after you've achieved, not just because you're living and enjoying life and the process of building it. And you tell yourself this is normal, that success at this level requires vigilance, that if you've built this much, staying on top of it at all times is just part of the deal. But when this becomes your standard pace, somewhere underneath that, your internal ground starts to erode because the definition of success you've been operating from requires you to sacrifice your well-being to sustain it. And here's what makes this so easy to normalize. You're successful, you're capable, and you're managing it all to what it looks like to the outside world as if you're Superwoman. But when you're always on high alert, because you're always in motion, you're always handling the next thing, internally, you're running on reserves you didn't realize were running low. You're absorbing costs you didn't agree to pay, and you're enduring what you thought you could sustain until you start to wonder if sustaining it is actually the same thing as enduring it. And that's the moment. Not when success collapses, but when it becomes clear that success measured by what you can endure isn't success that protects your quality of life. It's success that quietly costs you your ground, because what becomes visible is this. Endurance isn't the same as sustainability. And success that requires sacrificing your internal ground isn't sustainable, it's fragile. But grace can change the equation entirely, not by making you less successful, but by redefining success as something that builds you, not depletes you. And that's what we're going to explore today. You see, if success feels like you have to always be in constant motion and something you're constantly working to maintain instead of something that sustains you, the question isn't whether you're capable of holding what you've built. It becomes, what's it costing you internally to do it? Because here's what I've noticed. Success doesn't usually announce its cost up front. It reveals itself gradually in the way your nervous system stays slightly activated even when there's nothing urgent happening. In the way joy becomes something you experience after achievement, not during the process of building. In the way your internal ground quietly erodes while your external success continues to grow. And because you've been measuring success by what you can endure, by how much pressure you can absorb, how much you can manage, and how long you can sustain the pace, endurance starts to feel like proof of capability. Until one day you start to notice that endurance has been masking depletion. That's the first lens we're going to look through today. Not why you've been measuring success this way, but what becomes visible when you recognize that endurance and sustainability aren't the same thing. Because when achievement requires sacrificing your internal ground, the cost doesn't just show up in how tired you feel, it shows up in your quality of life. Rest stops feeling restorative and starts feeling like something you have to earn. Joy becomes conditional instead of natural, an automatic extension of your everyday experience. And success, the thing that you've worked so hard to build, starts to feel like something you're maintaining at the expense of your well being. Because the definition of success you've been operating from doesn't include grace. And without grace, success that looks impressive externally can still feel fragile internally. That's the second lens. What it actually costs when achievement requires sacrificing your ground. And then there's the third lens, the deeper layer, the one that changes how you measure success itself. Because grace doesn't make you less successful. It changes what success is allowed to cost you. When grace is part of the equation, success isn't measured by what you can endure. It's measured by what you can sustain without depleting yourself. Achievement doesn't require sacrificing your internal ground, it builds from it. And quality of life isn't something you earn after you've proven yourself, it's what grace protects while you're building. That's what we're really exploring today. Not whether you should build less or achieve less, but what becomes possible when grace redefines success as something that builds you, not depletes you. Now, usually there's this belief that if I can endure it, I can sustain it. That grace is something that you give to others and endurance is what you demand of yourself. And when you allow that belief to take root, then it's that belief that begins to shape how you measure whether you're succeeding or not. And for a long time, it may even feel true because although you've built success through endurance, through rising to what was needed, through absorbing complexity, and through proving that you can handle more than most people think is possible, that endurance that has been rewarded, where promotions came because you could manage what others couldn't, where opportunities opened up because you didn't flinch at pressure, and where recognition followed because you delivered, even when the cost was high. When success feels heavy, when it requires constant vigilance, and when rest starts to feel like something you can't afford, you tell yourself that that's just what success at this level requires from you. That if you can endure it, you can sustain it. And here's where it shows up without you even realizing it. Because you start measuring success by how much pressure you can absorb, not by what you're building, not by the impact that you're creating, and not by the quality of life that you're experiencing, but by how much you can actually carry without breaking. You believe that the harder it is, the more capable you have to be. The more you sacrifice, the more committed you have to be. The longer you endure, the more successful you'll become. And that belief gets reinforced everywhere. In the success stories you hear, the ones that emphasize what was sacrificed, what was endured, what had to be given up to get there. In the narrative that says paying your dues is just part of the process. In the expectation that if you want to succeed at a high level, you have to be willing to absorb costs that others aren't willing to give. And so you normalize the constant activation. You treat the inability to rest as a sign that you're serious about what you've built and what you're building. And you equate endurance with strength because that's what's been modeled, praised, and rewarded. And over time, that becomes a standard you measure yourself against. Can I handle this? Can I absorb this? Can I endure this long enough to sustain it? But here's what that belief doesn't account for. Endurance. It's not the same as sustainability because maybe you can endure something for a long time, but still be running on reserves that are almost gone. Maybe you can absorb pressure without breaking, but still be sacrificing your internal ground to do it. And maybe you are super capable, but trying to prove your capability through what you can withstand can still be operating from a definition of success that's fragile, not sustainable. Because success measured by what you can endure only works until your reserves run out. And by the time you notice this, the cost has already been absorbed. Your internal ground has already eroded. Your quality of life has already diminished. And you're left wondering why something that looks so successful externally feels so unsustainable internally. You see, the belief that endurance equals sustainability is why success can feel like something you're constantly working to maintain instead of something that sustains you. It's why rest can feel like failure instead of restoration, feeling like you should always be doing something, even in your downtime. It's why your nervous system stays activated even when there's no immediate demand, because the belief teaches you to measure success by cost, not by what it builds in you, but by what you're willing to sacrifice to hold it. When you treat sacrifice as proof of commitment, and when you measure success by how much you can absorb instead of what you can sustain with grace, that's a pattern that you've been operating from without questioning it. Because endurance can build success, but grace is what can make success sustainable. Grace is the wisdom to honor your internal ground as sacred, not something to sacrifice for achievement. It's what allows you to build without overriding your body's signals, to rest without calling it failure, to experience joy during the process, not just after you've proven yourself. Grace creates the conditions where success can grow alongside your well being instead of at the expense of it. It protects what endurance erodes: your internal reserves, your quality of life, your capacity to sustain what you've built. And that's why grace matters. Not because it makes you less capable, but because it's the only foundation that allows success to last without costing you everything to hold it. When you can finally see that belief for what it is, it becomes easier to see what it's been requiring of you, what it's been taking from you. Because beliefs like this don't interrupt life in obvious ways. They don't derail progress, but they make everything cost more internally than it needs to. And that's why most times you don't see the cost until it's already been paid. Because from the outside looking in, things often look fine. Achievements are accumulating, responsibilities are being handled, and success is being built brick by brick. And there's no obvious signal that anything's off, which is exactly why the cost takes so long to notice. And when you don't notice what's happening because you're so busy pushing through and doing the things, your internal ground, the steady foundation that used to support you, starts to weaken in the way that your nervous system stays activated even when there's nothing urgent happening, in the way rest stops feeling restorative and starts to feel like something you have to earn through achievement, in the way joy becomes conditional, something that shows up after you've proven yourself because it no longer shows up as a natural extension of your everyday experience. And when endurance is your measuring stick, you tell yourself this is normal. The success at this level means being always on, always ready. That if you've built this much, staying on top of it is just part of the deal. But here's what I want you to understand. When achievement requires sacrificing your internal ground, the cost doesn't always show up in how tired you feel. It shows up in your quality of life, where ease and enjoyment take a back seat. Because there's the success you're building, the tangible outcomes, the visible achievements, and then there's what it's costing you to hold it. Not the obvious cost of time, but the internal costs that no one tracks and that go unnoticed. The way you second guess decisions that were already sound, not because they needed correction, but because your nervous system didn't have the capacity to settle around them when they were made. The way rest feels like borrowed time, something you're taking from productivity rather than something your body requires. The way joy stops arriving naturally and it starts requiring justification, proof that you've earned the right to experience it. And you just keep carrying it because you've learned that endurance is strength and grace is for later. So you review your decisions after they're made. You stay mentally engaged during time off. You manage the internal activation quietly because you've normalized operating without support. And that constant self-regulation, that internal work of staying composed, staying steady, staying capable without grace, that's what depletes your quality of life. Not all at once, but gradually. And the joy that used to come naturally starts requiring achievement to unlock it. Joy stops being something you experience during the process of building your life, and it becomes something you allow yourself to feel only after you've achieved what you're striving for, only after you've proven it was worth it, only after the results justify the cost. And even then, it's fleeting because there's always the next thing to endure, right? The next level to sustain, the next proof of capability required. The ease that used to exist in your days gets replaced by a hum of low level vigilance that never fully turns off. And because endurance has been your operating system for so long, you stop questioning whether this is sustainable. You just keep going, believing that if you can endure it, you can sustain it. But what endurance can't create, what it actually erodes over time, is the very thing that grace protects: your quality of life while you're building. Because when endurance is your measure of worth, rest becomes evidence that you're not capable of sustaining the pace. It feels like weakness, like admitting you can't handle what you've built without needing to step away. So you only allow for rest after you've proven you don't need it, which means you rarely allow for it. But pressure never fully goes away, does it? Because the belief that endurance equals sustainability keeps the cycle going. And your quality of life, the thing that should be protected while you're building, becomes the cost you pay to maintain what you've built. What makes this so insidious is that the cost becomes normalized. Because when you operate this way for so long, you stop noticing that your internal ground is eroded because it happens gradually. You stop questioning whether rest should feel this hard to access because everyone else seems to be enduring. You stop recognizing that joy has become conditional because achievement has always required sacrifice, right? And grace? Well, grace starts to feel like something soft people rely on when they can't handle the pressure, like something you'll consider once you've proven that you don't need it. But here's what I want you to understand. Grace isn't weakness. It's what protects your internal ground while you're building. It's what allows success to be sustainable instead of something you're enduring. And it's what makes quality of life possible alongside achievement, not something you earn after. But listen, when grace is absent, when it's treated as optional or indulgent or something that comes later, success becomes fragile because the foundation it's built on, your internal ground, has been sacrificed to sustain it. And that's the real cost. Not the hours, not the hard decisions, not even the trade offs, but the erosion of your quality of life while external success continues to grow. The normalization of endurance as the proof of achievement and the loss of joy, rest, and steadiness in exchange for proving you can sustain what you've built. But grace is what can change that equation entirely. So it's so important for you to notice what endurance based success has been costing you, because noticing the cost can keep you from normalizing depletion so that you can start to feel what sustainability actually is. You see, the shift can begin when you catch yourself measuring success by cost instead of sustainability. In the moments where you catch yourself measuring success by what you're enduring, and instead of pushing through and ignoring your inner signals, you pause, not to criticize yourself, not to fix it immediately, but to see it, to recognize that you've been equating capability with how much you can absorb, that you've been treating sacrifice as proof of commitment, that you've been measuring success by cost instead of by what it builds in you, through you, and for you. And when you take notice, once you start to recognize that endurance isn't the same as sustainability, then you start to notice the moments before you override your internal signals, before you push through when your nervous system is asking for grace and a little space, before you tell yourself that if you can just endure it a little longer, it will settle. And instead of automatically pushing through, and instead of leaning on your old way of thinking of how do I keep sustaining this? Can I endure this? You shift to, does my nervous system actually have the capacity to hold this right now? And what would it feel like to extend myself grace instead and honor what my system is asking for? And when you can do that, that's when you start to see the difference between success that costs you and success that builds you. Because when grace is absent, when it's treated as optional or something you'll add later, success requires constant vigilance. It asks you to stay activated. It demands that you sacrifice rest, joy, and steadiness to prove your commitment. It measures your capability by how much you can absorb, not by what you can sustain. But when grace is present, when it's included in how you define success from the very beginning, and it's included in the process, everything has the potential to change. Where you move forward and quality of life moves with you. Rest feels restorative again, not like time stolen from productivity. Joy shows up naturally, not as something you have to justify. Ease returns to your days, not as a luxury, but as your baseline. And your nervous system knows it's supported because grace creates the internal space where quality of life is protected, not sacrificed. When grace is part of the equation, you can build, you can advance, you can succeed, and your internal reserves restore instead of erode because rest feels like true restoration and joy shows up during the process, not after you've proven yourself. Because grace isn't what makes you less successful. Grace is what makes success sustainable. It's what protects your internal ground while you're building. It's what allows quality of life to exist alongside achievement instead of being sacrificed for it. And here's where the shift goes even deeper. Once you experience what it feels like to build with grace instead of endure without it, you start to see success itself differently. Because success stops being measured by how much pressure you can absorb And it starts being measured by what you can sustain without sacrificing your well being, where sacrifice stops being proof of commitment and grace becomes proof of wisdom. The belief that if I can endure it, I can sustain it reveals itself as a non truth. And you recognize that sustainable success isn't built on endurance, it's built on grace. You see, proving asks, can I handle this? Can I absorb this? Can I endure this long enough to sustain it? But building asks, does this align with who I am? Does my nervous system have the capacity to hold this? Does this build me or does it cost me? Where proving measures success by external validation and internal sacrifice, building measures success by sustainability and internal alignment. Where proving treats rest as failure and joy as conditional, building treats rest as restoration and joy as present. And grace supports the foundation entirely because it redefines success as something that builds you, not depletes you, protecting your quality of life while you're achieving, not after. And it allows you to sustain what you've built without sacrificing your well being to do it. And once that shift happens, once you experience what it feels like to build from grace instead of enduring without it, you don't go back to measuring success by what you can absorb. You don't go back to treating endurance as proof of capability. And you don't go back to sacrificing your internal ground to sustain what you've built because you felt the difference. You've experienced what it's like when success and quality of life coexist, when achievement doesn't require depletion, when grace is strength, not weakness, and success that's built with grace doesn't just grow externally, it's sustainable internally. Because when grace redefines success as something that builds you instead of depletes you, everything shifts. Not just how success feels, but what success is allowed to cost. And once you experience that, once you recognize that success and grace aren't opposites, but partners, you realize that the version of success you've been enduring was never the only option, that there's another way that protects your internal ground, that sustains your quality of life, that allows you to build without depletion. And that way, it's grace. And that redefinition can change everything. So as you reflect on what we explored today, I want you to pause here just to notice a moment where you push through when grace is what you actually needed. Because what I've been sitting with lately is this: how am I defining success right now in my actual lived experience? Because when I look at what I've built and what I'm currently building, one of the things I take time to notice is, do I feel grounded in what I've achieved and what I'm building? Or am I immediately aware of what it's costing me to hold it? I've started paying attention to the moments when I equate success with what I can endure, partly because I used to measure my success by what other people told me success is supposed to look like. When I catch myself thinking that the harder it is, the more capable I must be, when I measure commitment by how much I'm willing to sacrifice and treat grace as something I'll extend to myself once I've proven I don't need it, first, I don't make it wrong that I thought the thought. I notice it and I get curious as to the why behind the thought. And most times it's because I've been pushing myself and treating endurance as my measuring stick instead of what my system can actually hold. When I think about a recent success, something I worked hard to achieve, I don't just evaluate the outcome by the achievement, but from a place of understanding. Was I operating from steadiness or from activation? Did my quality of life exist alongside my achievement, or did I sacrifice one to maintain the other? And did grace have a place in the process, or was endurance the only option? And what I'm noticing is that my nervous system knows the difference. Before I can name it logically, there's a felt sense, a recognition of whether success is building me or depleting me, whether I'm sustaining what I've created or enduring it. So I pause there with that awareness, with that recognition. And if endurance has been the driving factor and I feel myself feeling more tired than usual or even uncertain, because when I'm tired, I seem to question myself more, with that knowing, I ask myself, what has success been costing me? Not the visible costs like time, but the internal costs. The way my internal ground has eroded while my external success has grown. The way joy has become something I experience after achievement, not during the building. And truth be told, sometimes not at all, especially if all I'm doing is pushing myself using endurance as the tool. And even the way rest has started to feel like failure instead of restoration because I found myself in the past. Okay, let's be real. Sometimes it's happened even recently, thinking like I should be in the doing when I'm in my time of being off and resting and restoring and just being. I don't rush past that anymore like I used to. I let myself see what I've been normalizing, what I've been absorbing without questioning, what I've been treating as a necessary cost of capability. And then I sit with these questions. What would change if grace was part of how I built success, not something I added after? What would feel different if I measured success by what I can sustain with grace instead of what I can endure without it? And what would become possible if my quality of life is protected while I'm achieving, not earned after I've proven myself? Because awareness creates space, right? Space to see the pattern you've been operating from, space to recognize what it's been costing, space to imagine another way. And that space, that's where grace begins. When I think about success and endurance and grace, what stands out for me is how much of the experience of success happens internally, long before anything is visible on the outside, and how extending ourselves grace seems to be one of the hardest things we can do for ourselves, but so easy for us to extend to others. Success doesn't live in achievements or accomplishments. It lives in our bodies, in our minds. It lives in the moments where you're holding what you've built, carrying responsibility while trying to stay composed, often without ever naming what it's costing you to do it. And what I've come to recognize is how isolating that experience can be. Not because you're struggling with the work itself, but because when you're capable, when you deliver consistently, and when you rise to what's needed, it can often feel like there isn't time nor space to acknowledge what that requires internally. How much energy it takes to sustain success built on endurance instead of grace. How your quality of life can erode while your external achievements continue to grow. And how normal it becomes to measure success by what you can absorb instead of what you can sustain. And I keep thinking about what it would be like to have a space, not just for advice or strategies, but for the experience itself to be understood. But a cost of endurance based success didn't need justifying, where grace isn't treated as weakness, but as the wisdom it actually is, and where you could explore what it means to build without sacrificing your internal ground, knowing that others are exploring the same thing with you. And it's a big part of the reason why I want to create the Yes Reset community. Because what we've talked about today, how endurance gets mistaken for sustainability, how grace can redefine what success is allowed to cost, and how quality of life gets sacrificed when achievement requires it. This is the kind of conversation that rarely finds a place to exist. And I believe that conversations like this one deserve that space. Now, I've been in the legal industry for over 4 decades, and I know what it's like to work in professional spaces where quality of life and grace aren't part of the conversation. And I believe these spaces would be fundamentally different, better really, if we actually made room for these conversations. And it's why I'm in the market research stage right now to gauge what you want and if it's even something you would want me to do to build the Yes Reset community, a space for women in law where we could explore conversations like these around quality of life and grace, where you don't have to feel like you're alone on an island navigating the internal experience of sustaining success, where grace isn't something you consider after you've proven that you don't need it, but something that's treated as foundational from the beginning. I want it to be a space that doesn't rush you to solutions, where it's built around creating room to notice what's actually happening and what shifts when you're not carrying pressure of what you're doing alone. So, as I air this episode today, the community isn't open yet because I want to build it intentionally for the women it's meant to support and with the women it's meant to serve, which means I'm not guessing what you need, I'm listening. I want to know how you experience responsibility, what sustaining success actually feels like for you. And I want to know what you would want a space like this to hold. So if you're listening and you're thinking that this is something that you could potentially see yourself a part of, but you still have some questions, you need more information about what I'm building, then please reach out to me by email, which you'll find in the show notes, and we can talk through what you're thinking. And I'll answer any questions you have so you can see if this is something you'd like to be a part of. But if you are listening in and this is something you definitely are interested in exploring more and you want to be a part of building it with me, then you can apply through the link in the show notes to join the waitlist and share what you'd want a space like this to hold so that I can build it in a way that actually reflects how you think, how you decide, and how you carry responsibility. Also, that it has the kind of support you'd like to see inside the container and we can build this together. Either way, I'd love to hear from you. So many women are used to measuring success by what they can absorb, by how much they can sacrifice, by how long they can endure without ever recognizing or naming what it's costing them internally. And what I've come to understand is that success that lasts isn't built only through discipline or strategy or rising to what's needed. It's built through grace. Grace that protects your internal ground while you're achieving. Grace that allows quality of life to exist alongside you, alongside what you're building, not something you earn after everything's done. Grace that redefines success as something that builds you, not depletes you. Because when success is built with grace, it doesn't require constant vigilance to maintain your momentum, your focus, your drive. It doesn't ask you to sacrifice your well being to sustain it. It doesn't measure your capability by how much you can endure. It just simply stands. supported by a foundation that hasn't eroded your quality of life to hold it. And I think that's the shift many women are ready for. Not achieving less, not building less, but exploring and experiencing success in a way that doesn't cost them their ground. So as we move through this month together, through this grace series, my hope for you is this, that you begin to notice how you're measuring success, what feels sustainable, what feels like endurance, what builds you and what depletes you. Because grace doesn't make you feel less successful. It makes success sustainable. And quality of life, it's not what you earn after you've proven yourself. It's what grace protects while you build. Thanks for spending time with me today. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep believing, and keep designing your extraordinary life one day at a time.
Thank you for joining me on Her Extraordinary Life by Design. I hope you've been inspired and empowered by the incredible stories shared on this show. If you enjoyed this episode and the conversations we've had, I would greatly appreciate if you could take a moment to leave a review. Your feedback and support mean the world to me, and it will help others discover the podcast and join our empowering community. Remember to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Together, we can continue to learn from these amazing women, uncover their extraordinary journeys, and be motivated to create our own lives by design. Thank you again for tuning in. Until next time, stay empowered and keep shaping your extraordinary life one day at a time.
USAA knows dynamic duos can save the day, like superheroes and sidekicks or auto and home insurance. With USAA, you can bundle your auto and home and save up to 10%. Tap the banner to learn more and get a quote at usaa.com/bundle. Restrictions apply.
LifeLock, how can I help?
The IRS said I filed my return, but I haven't.
1 in 4 tax-paying Americans has paid the price of identity fraud.
What do I do?
My refund, though. I'm freaking out.
Don't worry, I can fix this.
LifeLock fixes identity theft guaranteed and gets your money back with up to $3 million in coverage.
I'm so relieved.
No problem. I'll be with you every step of the way.
1 in 4 was a fraud-paying American. Not anymore. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Electricast.